How do you answer all 5 query letter questions if you've got 2 protagonists in the query letter? My name is Gina. I'm an author, editor, publishing professional. I help you make your writing better. In case you don't know what it is I'm talking about, I suggest that there are 5 questions every query letter should be answering. And so these are: who is the main character? What is it that they want? What are they willing to do to get it? What is standing in their way? And what happens if they fail? You're not going to answer those in a checklist format, and they're not even going to necessarily be answered in order, but at the end of the query letter, you should be able to answer all of those with the information that was given. But this commenter specifically asks, but I've got 2 protagonists, how do I do this? So first of all, I'm always going to push back on this a tiny bit. Do you have 2 protagonists? Because a lot of times people think that all of their main characters are protagonists, and a lot of times people think that all of their POV characters are protagonists. Now, 2 is a very normal number. There's a lot of stories that have co-protagonists, or we call them cotagonists sometimes. So that's a totally normal number, but I do want everyone watching this to think, do I really have 2 protagonists, or do I just have 2 characters that are really important to me? If you do, yes, have 2 protagonists, and they do both need to be in the query letter, which that's another stop point here, that you can have a protagonist that is not necessarily in the query letter. You could pick just one of them to use as your emotional through line for the query letter, so you don't have to do this. But there are a lot of times, like if we're talking about romances in which both of those protagonists, they're both going to win in the exact same way at the end, and their story does not make sense one without the other. You need both of them. So that's what you're going to do. You're usually going to have 1 paragraph from the first protagonist, 2nd paragraph from the 2nd protagonist, and then a 3rd and possibly a 4th if necessary, in which their stakes are mingled together, in which you have blended their storylines because they're fighting for the same story, right? Like they're both protagonists, they're both going to win, or they're both going to change in the same positive direction, or negative. I guess if you're doing a tragedy, you could be doing it that way. So, but if we've got 2 protagonists and their story needs to be told in the same book and they are on the same emotional arc, then their stakes are going to be mingled up together. The story is intertwined, and so at some point they need to intertwine, and you're going to demonstrate that in the query letter. In the case of a romance, what happens if they fail? They die lonely. Like that is the answer to number 5 for both of your people. Now there might be other stuff involved in there as well, but you can see very quickly how when we are mingling these stakes together, that you're not now telling 2 separate stories, you are telling a story of how these 2 people's lives have intersected. And if you are totally and completely sure that you need to have both of those points of view, then it becomes even more important to not have a ton of world building and backstory in that query letter. You need to stay focused on character, stakes, and what the story is doing right now.